very like specifically written, and oftentimes they're written specifically so that only one or two, you know, organizations can actually bid on those contracts, and that is really challenging. And so that's another way that SBIR and some of these other programs, the other transactional authorities, can make getting contracts a little bit easier, but it's still super challenging. Like, I don't think even as a small business, I probably would not spend a great deal of time on FedBizOps. It's really tricky to navigate. It's just, I don't know. It's not really like what most people think of when they think of you know, getting a contract and doing business. Yeah, even the fast track, quick access can still take a really long time. I think the quickest I've seen some of the contracts we've worked on go through is like 2 months, but that's like unheard of. So that's something to think about. Even though they think this is innovative and rapid, it tends to be still a longer process than most small businesses would like. So then, yeah, then the decision makers with control over how they prototype transitions into a program. Pilot Training Next, I think, is a good example of that, and that's really where David Zachary had challenges. You know, they were working with a big systems integrator, SAIC, to actually deliver, to get the contract. So they didn't contract directly with Pilot Training Next, and that can be super frustrating and challenging. But it's something that if you know that going into it, there are a few things that you can do to kind of you know, mitigate those like contract award challenges. So just to give you a little bit more about Army Futures Command and Army Applications Lab, they are essentially the tip of the spear for innovation recruiting for Army Futures Command, and their sole purpose is identifying the technology, actually getting it you know, into their system, and then getting it, the transferring the technology into the units that they work with, and that's their objective. Whether or not they're actually doing that is another issue. If you look at, go to Zach Walker on LinkedIn. I'll pull his name up here in a second, but he's got a really good article about ways in which the Army Futures Command and Army Applications Lab, how they've got a lot of room to grow. And we're starting to see from the Capital Factory perspective, like ways in which they're actually developing a structure for working with startups. And I think, you know, when they first showed up, they were basically like, we're the Army, we're gonna do this, it's gonna be amazing. But also we wanna learn from the community. And I think it was that piece of, but we're going to learn, that a lot of people didn't really recognize, and they're like, the Army's here, they can just pay us now, and like, it doesn't work that way. They're trying to figure it out, but I think it's actually exactly how it should happen. They've kind of planted their flag, they've started to integrate into the community, and now they're just starting to figure out, like, okay, what does this look like tangibly, and how do we actually go and do this stuff? They represent cross-functional teams, and so they have a number of different priorities that they call their modernization priorities. This is like the biggest restructuring of the Army in probably 40 years, and so they're approaching it in this like very modular format. One of the first modernization priorities that they identified is their long-range precision fire capabilities, and so they launched this program called the FAR. It's the Field Autonomous Auto Resupply Challenge, and so they literally have this big challenge where they've got the ammo units that deliver these like 92-pound howitzer rounds to these Paladin fighting vehicles, and I actually got to pick one up, and it's insane how heavy these things are. But the current solution is you have they call them ammo buddies, and they're basically the guys that pull the artillery from the ammo supply vehicle, and then they run it across to the Paladin tanks and load it up. And that's the solution that they've been using, since those fighting vehicles entered the arena. And so they came to us and said, well, what if we could find folks that can do like robotic, deployment, so you can take it using an autonomous vehicle of some sort and have it transfer the ammunition. So that's something that they put out to the community, and they're actively soliciting solutions for.
100,000.
I'm sorry?
They're doing 100,000 K.
I think that might be accurate. Yeah.
For FAR.
Yeah, and so I think there's 7 or 10 different modernization priorities, and that's just the first one that they've really launched with. But they're also looking for very buzzword compliant technology areas: AR, VR, 3D printing, computer vision. So they really are like actively seeking all these things, and we're starting to see a lot more folks like yourself showing up saying like, hey, maybe I can help them, and here's my solution. So okay, any questions there? I've been speaking for a while. I'm gonna take a sip of water.
They're 98 pounds. They're called cats. I've been out with these guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have to take them from that place and put them in there. Now they have some that are in the thing themselves.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I didn't realize is how when they actually fire these howitzers, basically you get only a certain number of fires before the enemy can like target you.
Yeah,
so you have to like pick up and move. Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy.
The real like challenge that they're trying to fix is like the rate of fire. And so as long as the goal is if they can increase the rate of fire, then they can put more artillery downrange and then move. And it's like, all right, cool. How do we fix that? But the terrain changes. Sand versus rocks and marshes and all that stuff. Like wherever they end up deploying. So
yeah, they can't go up big hills or down big hills because the nozzle's too big and stuff like that. So, yeah.
But it turns out that a human is the best solution at this point. So
from a business support standpoint, how far down that path do you go with your partners here? So say someone designs a violent system and the Army says, we want to buy this. Do you help them through manufacturing distribution as well? Like how far
the
down
we
that
being
road?
Capital Factory?
Yeah.
No.
Or you just help that initial get in, and if they get approved, then it's like go find it.
That's a great question. I see us, obviously Capital Factory is a startup accelerator, and so if you have a really good idea that you think can help solve the Army's biggest challenges, we want to invest in you. Like we want you to be part of our portfolio. But in terms of how we're helping them, we can maybe point you in the right direction, but we're essentially a marketing arm for these big challenges that the Army has.
Got it. So you don't have any like established industry connections beyond that point?
That's probably a question better asked to like our accelerator team or our mentor network. My short answer would be we probably know somebody, but that's not our primary focus. So this is Zach Walker. He's one of my favorite people in this whole ecosystem, just because he is so experienced. He served in the Army, also in the Air Force. He was in the CIA and the NSA, and he's just a super smart guy. He just got his MBA from MIT, and he's probably one of he's my go-to person anytime I'm like, what does this mean, or what's the likelihood of this happening, or whatever. I talk to Zach. So he is looking for any kind of tech. DIU has not really made too many investments, if any, in Austin. They've maybe done like one big deal, and I know they're working with Icon, the 3D print buildings. I don't know where things are at. Do you know where things are at with Icon?
Not with that project in particular.
Okay.
I know they do put solicitations out on their website often.
Yeah.
But it's national, so it can be anybody who picks it up.
Yep. But yeah, Zach is great to talk to, and apparently the contract type they use is OTA 23771B. I guarantee you, I know who put that in there. It was Kevin Landry. He's like our go-to guy for all that stuff. But yeah, talk to him for that for sure. And DIU, by the way, they do events pretty much quarterly. So if you see something go out on like our event site with DIU, Zach will likely be there. AppWorks, they are doing a lot of like really rapid testing evaluation programs for Air Force stakeholders. Like I mentioned, the AETC, the Air Education Training Command, and then the Pilot Training Next program. They are kind of the conduit to work with those guys. We did, Jen Mars, she's my go-to at AppWorks. She's awesome. But we did a really cool event with them recently called Spark Collider, It's only the second one that they've done, but it is essentially those phase 1 SIBR awardees that I was telling you about. You get a phase 1 SIBR. Well, how do you meet a bunch of base commanders and folks who can actually give you a contract and funding? You come to a Spark Collider. So we're going to be doing these in a series. So if you do if you're a startup and you get phase 1 funding through AppWorks for SIBR, you go to the Spark Collider, and it's literally like we just do this. Like we bring all the base commanders, the MAGCOMs, and the procurement offices, and we bring them together and say, here's a bunch of phase 1 award recipients, go and talk to them and figure out if their solution is a good fit for you. So Patrick Hitchens, when he did that with Fit Rankings, we don't see these opportunities, these startups as like opportunities to do business with the government, but somehow they all figure it out, and that's great for us. Like that's the role that we play as just matchmaker. Pat's solution is super cool, but it's essentially like aggregated fitness data on a platform so that companies can like have interdepartmental competitions about who can run more, be more fit. Like that's their solution, and it integrates like Garmin watches, Apple watches. If you can get fitness data on a wearable, you can plug it into this platform. And it turns out that's actually a fantastic solution for the National Guard units that the Texas Military Department represents. They don't need to actually like have you track your fitness and like go run a mile and prove that you can do it. They can just pull it all in through Fit Rankings. So they're off to the races, and like that's exactly what we want to see more of. And AppWorks is doing it better, arguably better than anybody. Army Applications Lab also has access to SIBR funding. I don't know if that's how DIU funds their companies. I don't think it is. Do you know, Sarah?
So far, only OTA, but it wouldn't surprise me because everyone's like running to SIBRs now.
Yeah.
In the last 6 months, people are like, oh, this is a way easier way to get money.
Yeah.
And so people are jumping on the bandwagon with the SIBRs.
I think DHS is using it as well as like FBI, but I don't know how all that works. Like maybe we can discuss it later.
Okay.
Do you know more about SIBR?
Well, yes, so originally it started out as all agencies, everything from National Institute of Health, so like universities do it, EPA, any government agency, and then the military said, well, hey, if that's an easy way for them to get money, let's do it too, and then it kind of transferred over in that fashion.
Yeah, really interesting stuff. NGA, they are kind of like a quiet, partner down on the 8th floor. Their outposts, though, are basically Silicon Valley and here, but they're interested in unconventional data, analytics, modernization, automated analysis, AI, cybersecurity. Interestingly, even though they do geospatial stuff, they haven't really, they don't do a lot with like aerospace. We have a few aerospace companies, and apparently that's not really a big focus area for them. But basically everything that happens to like process the data, they just have tons of data, and so that's what they're looking for. That's about all I know about NGA. They're a relatively junior member of the group. I don't know where this slide came from. These are just some partners that we've worked with, in case you're interested in that. These are like the worst version of every logo. I don't know what's going on with this.
Deloitte just has a green dot.
Yeah, this is a better version. Maybe they pulled it from here. These are Innovation Council members, and that's another group that I work pretty closely with. Capital Factory is actively seeking, Fortune 500s and other big partners who have an interest in working in the space. That's what my team focuses on doing, bringing these folks in so that as a startup in our community, you have access to lots of like really awesome folks who have big budgets and want to work with you. And I think a couple of really good examples to note, AWS and Microsoft, they're like super gung-ho because they just want to get everybody on their cloud platform. But an interesting like kind of horse race to watch is the JEDI contract that the Army is soliciting right now. I haven't checked in on it in a while, but it's effectively like which cloud provider is the Army going to go with, and whichever one they pick, it's going to be right now. It's kind of a 2-horse race between AWS and Microsoft, but Oracle is suing, for like unfair contracting practices, which is a very common thing. Anytime there's a big contract, somebody's suing and saying, why not me? And why did you eliminate me? And it's not fair and it's anti-competitive. So we'll see where that one goes. I don't really know.
I think they already tossed out Cisco's complaint,
Oh, did they?
like last week.
So it should happen sometime soon, and both of our partners, AWS and Microsoft, are like, we're gonna get it. So we'll see. And they may end up splitting the contract. I don't really know how that'll work, but it's a huge contract. It's like $10 billion. So, but the rest of the folks that are on this list, they're all here in support of everything that's going on. And like some of the systems integrators are starting to figure out that, you know, if a company is at phase 2 and they want to get to phase 3, they're going to need to go through a systems integrator. And so they're all just kind of like waiting to see who emerges as those likely phase 3 award recipients. So we will see. Some big upcoming events. During South by, well, we have, I don't know why it doesn't say, so it's Austin Startup Week. That's coming up next week. So if you're interested in being a part of that, I highly recommend going on austinstartupweek.com and RSVPing to a couple of those events. There's a couple of really cool partners who are going to be there and some startups that will be featured. I don't know if Valkyrie is going to be on it. You are?
I'll be speaking at one of the defense panels I'm hosting.
Awesome. So that's going to be coming up soon. And then at South by, as I mentioned last year, we did a whole bunch of programming, and I imagine we'll be doing the same this year as well. But we do an AMA once a month. That's today, the third Tuesday. And then the TDIF, Texas Defense Innovation Forum, Kevin Landtroop actually runs that. So if you're interested in a monthly event around defense innovation, I would highly recommend checking that out. DIU, quarterly events. AppWorks, we don't do them regularly, but we do them frequently. And then more and more, we're getting folks coming in doing events and programs around big sticky topics in the defense space. Okay. Oh boy. Oh, we don't need to talk about that. Oh yeah, STTR is the Small Business Tech Transfer. That's more of like the university research side of things. We didn't talk about that. Yes.
If I may, so I'm actually working with the Army to help with the sitter program right now.
Cool.
And it's actually a collaboration between a startup and a research institution. So they are actively seeking startups who are working on certain things. You just have to have a university partner. But they can potentially, there are ways that you can potentially find a partner. So if anyone's interested in that, you can talk to me because they're trying to place a bunch of those awards in October.
Very cool.
So yeah.
I would love to talk to you about that. I need to know more. It has come up like so infrequently in conversation. I've all but written it off because I'm like, well, you're actually awarding money through SIBR, so let's just go with that.
It's just as valuable.
It's
Yeah.
super similar to
Yeah.
the SIBR. It's just, you just have to have a research institution partner. It's the only major caveat. I don't work for the Army. I don't want to speak too much on their behalf.
Sure.
But I just went to a big event that we did to promote this. So it's super similar, yeah.
Cool, good to know.
Oh, I was just gonna say, we have a phase 2 STTR going on right now in phase 1, and everything you said is correct. The ideal situation is when the university has some cool technology and the small business has, you know, ways of, you know, commercializing that and marketing it.
Very cool. All right. Today I learned. So here are just a bunch of words. I'm not going to go through these. Yeah, and then this is kind of how to get started in SIBR or any of the government, contracting sites. So Capital Factory went through SAM, and then most of the invoicing we do is through WAF, which is the Wide Area Workflow Management System. And these systems, oh my God! Has anybody used SAM.gov or WAF? Do you use WAF? It is it is mind-numbing what a pain in the ass it is. And as a taxpayer, I'm just like, please, can we find a better solution to these things? And I just don't really know how that's going to happen. But so here are some other useful websites. The DIU solicitations. I'm sure if you just went to diu.mil, you could find it without going through that long link. Some of the stuff that's out there is useful. I've cobbled together, anytime I have a question about what a CLIN/SLIN is, or all of these different like government terms, there's actually a lot of really good information out there. So if you do ever get stuck, first go to Zach Walker and then come to me. But I would also highly advise, if you do get into a government contract if you get into a contract with the government, you'll always have a contracting officer. And what I've learned is that some are more, I guess, like useful or helpful than others. So if you get stuck, just keep asking for somebody else, and you'll find somebody. That's super vague and probably not useful, but AppWorksChallenge.com is their solicitation site. Cyber.defensebusiness.org is a source for information about cyber. I really should have gone through this deck before I started clicking through. Yeah. Talk to people. All right, cool. Talk to us. Come on up, Sarah.
Hey.
So Sarah is a data scientist at Valkyrie. There's a typo on this slide. It's not Valkyrie S. So I would love to know more about what you do, what Valkyrie does, and if anything that I just said sounds interesting or that needs to be added to, let's talk about
You were
that.
spot on with all of your information, though. It was good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've spent some time trying to
Yeah.
catch up to speed, but
Spot on. So I'm a data scientist at Valkyrie, and what we do in mostly enterprise space is just make use of people's data. It can be large public organizations, automotive, finance, tech, health tech, and we just take all their unused data and create valuable information from it, whether it be like behaviors that their employees are doing or behaviors that their customers are doing, and saying, well, they got Fritos from the vending machine, so they're more likely to do this or this. Anything, like just random things you would never think that you could create information from. We do that for customers. And we're using machine learning algorithms and using graph database and a few other solutions to help create valuable information for people. And we want to help the government create valuable information out of their data too, whether that's intelligence, security, fraud detection, as well as computer vision. The implications are endless, really, of what we could do. But we need relationships with other people in the tech community and with other larger companies to help get the job done. If you are just coming to the space, don't worry, you haven't missed that much, because it's been taking people a long time to get their groundings and understanding this space on the military side and on the tech community side. So everyone's kind of just getting their bearings since the Army got here. We thought they'd be so eager to get started because they all cried like they needed it immediately. So sorry, that's just my vent there. But they're kind of coming together now and really getting organized. So I'm happy to see that things are coming along.
they are eager. I'll give them that.
They are so eager.
I
And
think it's just
yes.
Well, and military procurement immediately means within this decade.
Yeah.
yeah.
True.
Exactly. Who are some of the government customers that Valkyrie is working with?
Previously, we've done some small engagements with DARPA, and then we're going to partner with a big, it's not written in ink, but it was one of the ones that you put on the
Ooh.
thing, so we're excited to do some engagements with them. And then we are like on the fence with AppWorks because we presented a great presentation for them, but it turns out they didn't have the data to do it. So we're like back and forth with, are they going to get the data or not? So
I don't know. Do you know anything about GrowthX? Do you know about that program?
don't know that one.
So that's GrowthX is a data science boot camp that I don't know who the actual. I think GrowthX is the name of the organization, but they're cyber funded to train AppWorks.
We saw that solicitation, yes.
Oh, really?
But I just didn't think we were prepared to be like a Valkyrie data science school. I don't know if we were ready to be that. So
That is interesting. Yeah. So that's I think another example of like how they're looking to the startup community to think like startups, act like startups, and train their folks to be data scientists. I'm curious. Did you have anything to do with Kessler Run? Has Valkyrie been involved in that at all? Do you know about
if
that?
we have, side note, like I'm on the science side and I really stay like head down on the keyboard. So if my business development team has done it, like I don't know. They don't
Okay.
always keep me in the loop of what's going on. They just like put me in the corner and make me do science. So.
Kessler Run is actually a really interesting I don't know, sort of experiment that was a DIU funded project. And it's, I think Pivotal Labs ended up getting like the contract for it, but it's super cool. And if you haven't read about it and you want to learn more, I probably am not the best person to talk about it, but I just know that it's a really cool way that the Air Force used data and data management through a platform. So tell me then, what are the things that, having said everything we said about where things are at right now, what are you excited about for the kind of stuff that you're working on and the ways in which the DoD is starting to like figure out how to work with companies like Valkyrie? What's on the horizon?
I'm really excited that agencies are now going to SIBR. I feel like, so FYI, Air Force is opening their open topic on Tuesday. So if you go on their website, that means you can take any of your technology or idea that you have and send it to them. And it's a pretty, well, from what Ryan said, he said it's like 50% they award. So we're pretty excited about that. We're gonna submit something for them, revolving around predictive maintenance. That's kind of our plan of what we're gonna submit.
Cool.
So we're excited to do that. I know that's a big area of interest for Army, Air Force, and other agencies of predictive maintenance and using decision-making computer algorithms to do it.
So on that note, what are the kinds of like, I don't know, big data applications that obviously they're looking at predictive maintenance as one of those things. They get a lot of data points and then they can like use that to make better decisions. Are there other ways that you all have imagined like, hey, if they just did this, it would be awesome? What are those kinds of like big opportunities?
Well, there's so many areas, and I think but obviously there's the obvious of like, okay, let's organize all of our data, let's help identify things, making sure that it is what we say it is, and then sending it through some organizational data frame and back end, and then making the decision on that. But then we forget about the individual soldier. So things like predicting PTSD. We always think about the technology of boots on ground, but then we kind of forget about, afterward, intelligence, artificial intelligence, and machine learning can also be used for medical diagnosis and just the healthcare of the individual as well, and helping our veterans.
I think, that's actually a really interesting point. So one of the things that comes up a lot well, not a lot, but at first people were like, oh, you're working with the military, like, military is bad. Or whatever they say, I don't know what they say. But I think that's been interesting from my perspective, representing the Capital Factory side of things. Like, we see the DoD as a big business opportunity for our startups. We don't necessarily, like, nobody here is making weapons. The one example that I shared with you about like the autonomous auto resupply, it's not about like the weapons, it's just moving some things. How do you see, like, how does Valkyrie and the company ethos line up with like, what the DoD is looking for and what you guys want to do? Does that ever come up in conversation?
Sure, and I mean, things like also disaster relief. So if there's like a huge flood, how do we deploy resources to where? And I have a great story behind it. For example, information of public data that we use to help create insight. So the Waffle House, everyone's been to a Waffle House. Well, the Waffle House has a very particular system they use to tell other Waffle Houses of what their supply and readiness is. So they have like a red, green, and yellow status, just like a stoplight, to say like, green, we are open, we're fully supplied. Yellow, okay, we're low on some things, we're in a vulnerable state, but we're open. And then red is like, we're completely shut down, we have no electricity, we have no water. And that's how they communicate. So you can use public data sets to help relay the information when there's no way to understand what's going on. For like, say, a huge hurricane comes and hits Houston, it's really hard to understand at a street by street, block by block level of like what's underwater, what's not underwater, and like where the electricity is and not. So things like that could really tell you information, and that's what we hope to do.
So using Waffle House.
Using Waffle House data
that's really
to
interesting.
send resources.
I think that's another yes. So to add to that, like the fact that and these are all things I've started to kind of learn, but like that the guard units are deployed in emergency situations or like disaster situations, And like the kinds of things that they're looking for are not, you don't think of them as like military applications, but do you know Aerial Applications, that company?
Yes, I've heard of them.
So what they're doing is in a post disaster scenario, they actually can deploy drones or take the data that drones can pick up, aerial data, and find out like where power lines are down or what streets are actually closed, where there could potentially be victims who need assistance, things like that. I imagine the data is just insane.
Yeah.
We don't have a floor above us, so I'm guessing that's coming from below.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that.
In scenarios like that, you could create a computer vision that would identify flood lines.
Mm.
So on a wall, you could tell the computer, okay, this is what a flood line looks like,
Mm.
and then you could put it, if it's like so far from a roof, then you could identify how far underwater it is. I mean, that's just like one application of a computer vision.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys do any work in computer vision for like augmented reality or other arenas like that, or what?
We haven't
Yeah.
gone into augmented reality. It would not surprise me if we do, because it's like we have our hands in everything right now. But we haven't done past projects in augmented reality.
And then in terms of like computer vision and AI, what are the trends that you guys are paying attention to, and like what are the big, I guess, like developments there and things on the horizon for machine learning and computer vision?
I feel like a big trend on the horizon is moving from, it's more like on the nerdy side, like how you're structuring your databases and how you're structuring your back end. It's no longer SQL databases of like table. It's now going into what's called Neo4j, or a graph database, and it's all like relationship theory based, using behaviors of the individual. So individual A was spotted at the market at 10:52, but then we saw these two people in a car together. So it's being able to like map out what a person's behavior is doing, and that can be really useful for intelligence when you're trying to identify human trafficking, terrorism activity, and identifying a person of interest.
Do you see? Have you been a part of any of the big discussions about like the ethics of AI, or like the ethics of like?
Yes, that always comes up.
Yeah. What are your, I don't know, what's your
Because the
perspective?
AI always ends up being not politically correct or racist of some sort.
Oh,
so,
yeah. Was that
yeah.
the thing where it was like a bot, an AI bot that eventually, like a chat bot that eventually just it learns from other people?
Mhm.
Have you guys seen that?
Expose it to Reddit, it turns into a racist really quick.
Correct.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know. I find that super interesting, and like what's China and what they're doing with like facial recognition and things like that.
The
Is it,
social credit scoring, the whole system that they're building, where it takes everything, not just the face, but everything that you do. puts it all together.
Yes. How the Chinese are starting
Yeah,
to.
the social credit score thing that they've got,
Mhm.
where they can compile all the data, it's getting to be creepy, literally creepy.
Yeah, I'm concerned about like Israel's doing really well, by the way, in
Mhm.
their technology. What they're selling to other countries. For example, they were the company, or that country that had the company that sold Pegasus to the FBI whenever the shooter in California happened. What was the name of that city? San Bernardino.
Yeah.
There was a shooting in San Bernardino, and then the FBI wanted the back door to the iPhone. And Apple said, we're not giving you the back door, so then they just went to Israel and bought Pegasus, which is a back door to Apple.
Oh.
We had to be careful about what countries are selling their technology to who, because then they sold it to Saudi Arabia and there was a journalist killed.
And there are all
Wow.
sorts of companies that sell into Mexico and to known corrupt police forces
Mhm.
in other states that sell
Right.
this technology effectively straight to cartels.
We're in an interesting time. I feel like this is the wild, wild west, because nothing's regulated on data. For example, like Facebook,
Yeah.
like this is wild, wild west of data, because there's no regulation. So people are just doing whatever they want with it until there's regulation.
That's really interesting. Man, yeah, I'm learning so much
Texas,
today.
yeah.
So, okay, any other like thoughts on working with the DoD, or I don't know, just like big rocks that folks should know about?
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you my personal experience on like this journey of like up and down and things that didn't work for me. We sat down and had great conversations with General Ostrowski and General Thomas and Spark before he retired, but those guys are not writing the contracts. So just keep that in mind. It's great to have relationships with them, it really is, but at the end of the day, your contracting officers are gonna be the one to help get the job done. And then I feel like the military agencies also put partnering equal to them. Like, look as partners as your customers just as much as another agency, because a partner can be just as much leverage or a way to a contract, just as a working for the Army or the AppWorks would be. And collaborate with each other. Like, that's the most important thing. Just work with each other. Go to the networking events. Yeah, you can meet with the military guys and they're great, but like the people that you're surrounded by are just as important. Your peers, they're not competitors. Think of them as your helpers, you know?
I also have seen that a lot at these, a lot of like the networking and community events. Everybody has a different experience and a different story to share. And you know, for whatever I can contribute, I'm also happy to chat about it. I've had a limited experience working with contracts for the government, but like it is an ongoing process at this point. And every single time I do it, I learn so much. Even today, I was learning about the color of money and how they, you know, certain funding has to be coded, and it's just like, all right, well, I didn't know that, but let's go from here. So that's super interesting. Well, why don't we open it up for questions? Any burning questions from the crowd?
I don't know if it's burning, but.
It has to be a burning question. Sorry.
Throw the question.
Light it on fire.
So you mentioned, you know, SIBRs and other things that are pretty well known ways of getting your company in front of these, you know, in front of these potential government agencies that are potential. You know, I'm particularly interested in DARPA, who we already are on contract to. Just like we'd like to get to know local people. Are there other opportunities for that outside of, you know?
Yes.
And we have SIBRs, so we already have sort of entrees into those, into different agencies that way.
That's a great question. We have 3 fantastic organizations, 3 now, because I just found out about another one. TDIF, I know he'd mentioned that, the Texas Defense Innovation Forum. That's going a little more towards, Kevin has told me that he wants to use it more for corporate companies to kind of engage with the military. But for just local individuals, there is the Defense Innovation Forum, and it's a national organization, and there's a chapter here in Austin. And they are fantastic. And Kevin is part of that too.
So Defense Innovation Forum is different than Texas Defense Innovation Forum?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh.
It's not a chapter of. It's a one entity that Kevin and Chris Sineski founded.
Gotcha.
But Defense DEF.
Defense. Oh, it's
No.
the Defense Entrepreneurship.
Entrepreneur Forum. I'm
Forum.
sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry. Defense Entrepreneur Forum. There's a lot of them, and that I think is a fantastic group of individuals that get together once a month. They also have a Slack channel if any of you guys use Slack, and we communicate like daily of what's going on, and we're trying to get the national conference to be held here in Austin next year. And I think it's gonna happen because it's down to 2 cities, and people on Slack were voting which one, and we just like blew it out of the water. I really think Austin's gonna get picked for that, so that'll be a really cool event, and everyone's super nice, and that's the most important thing to me. Is like, I don't like people that are competitive against each other. Like, everyone's just like, hey, we're all on the same team here. We're working together for a positive cause for our country.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've seen a lot of that happening around the space, where like most of the startups that are coming to the table and like trying to do business with the government, this is their first time doing this, and we've seen a lot of that where like people are very open to supporting what's going on and like helping you get connected. Other organizations that I've found.
Can I ask a quick follow-up? You said there were 3,
Yeah.
and you mentioned 2.
Sorry, yeah.
Texas Defense Innovation Forum, and then Defense Entrepreneur Forum.
And then now there is the Association of the Army that meets out of Camp Mabry.
AUSA.
AUSA, correct?
Yes.
Because I met with them this week, and they're a great group as well.
They're doing some stuff in Austin as well. In particular, they're doing their big conference here in June, I think.
Here in Austin?
Yeah.
Wow. That's a big,
They
that's
have
a
one in
very
November. They have
big
something
help
else
for us.
coming up in November too.
Yeah, I don't know what that is, but AUSA is.
I kind of felt like there was more leaders from larger companies, so like a Deloitte and McKinsey were there. So if you're looking for partnerships or like a big to help be your prime or vice versa, that's a good group to go to.
Yeah.
Cool. Other questions? Yep.
So I work at Mapbox, and we have varying levels of success in government over like 10 years now, right? We haven't really expanded into, you know, sort of high level, really programs of record. We've gotten some money through innovation, we've got some money through DIUs of the world. We can't get to that next level, right? That next level of being sticky. So like when you're talking about small businesses and startups, we're not that anymore. But we're also not Microsoft and Amazon and Oracle. I'd love to hear both your perspectives, and then specifically on like how we can get more ingrained or involved in the capital factory side. Do you consider sort of like that middle tier of businesses as like partners, customers, both, other?
You guys are like 100 employees here?
We're over 400 now.
Over 400. Because I was gonna say the cap to be considered like small businesses around 500.
Yeah, I think both in terms of employees and revenue, we're beyond what's considered small business, so
Okay.
we're not.
So you guys are considered like a big. I would partner with smaller companies to help like bring innovation in, and then help guide them. You know, be like, hey, and we can help grow you. You can help grow us.
Right, so, we've done that as well, we're working with a couple companies that are based here, 3Data being one of them, we're doing some interesting stuff with AR, VR. Where I see a lot of challenges is twofold, specifically when it comes to DoD, is, you know, you can go the integrator route, like you can get sort of like stuck to the SAICs, the CACIs,
Yeah.
the EEs, and BOOs, whatever, and those can be successful. But when you're really building, you know, focusing on the technology, there's two hurdles I run into to really sort of build those relationships and get ingrained into DoD. And one is clearances, which you're not going to get unless the contract calls for it. And most of the time, if you're priming or if you're not priming a contract, the prime's going to get the clearances. Sometimes they can help you out in those regards, but clearances being one. The other is ATOs when it comes to your technology. Like if you're building a technology stack that DoD requires to be on premise, right? There's a whole set of like security accreditation that you have to go through, and it's been very difficult to get that stuff accredited to the level of full production. So it's like we've had the successes that you're talking about in getting to a certain point, and perhaps this is something that Capital Factory focuses on in the future, is like what is that next level for that like middle tier of companies?
Do they want it on their
Who don't fit
zipper?
either one, right? What's that?
Do they want it on their zipper? They want it on their network.
Zipper, JWix,
All of it.
all of it, right?
I was gonna say like.
But they don't, oftentimes, if you get to the end of the POC or pilot phase, whatever that they funded, and then nobody throws their hand up in the air to do the 6 to 12 months worth of ATOing because it's a time suck, it's resource constrained, right? Unless your technology is like
That is a really tough
100%
problem.
critical, that's not even there anymore. Because Mapbox, we're a developer platform for mapping, right? Well, there's been a player in the government space in mapping technology for 40 plus years. Not that it's identical or, you know, one-to-one comparable, but sometimes when like the government, they'll consistently say like, yeah, this thing over here it's good enough.
Yeah.
Right? Like we'll do a little bit of innovation, we'll throw 6 figures at you, we'll throw, you know, maybe small 7 figures, but like for that longevity of a government sort of contract relationship, which is I think what we're all here for. We're not here to get the ones and twos and leave government, right? If you're gonna invest the time and money as a startup, you need to play the long game.
Right.
It's not a short game. You can't, you know, to your point, you shouldn't focus on the government solely as your primary customer, but it's how do you get to that next level? And I think that's one of the reasons for me being here is like I want to get tied with the smaller companies. That way we can sort of help each other grow. But it's also like, okay, but then there's the two of us, we need that extra push to get that.
That is a really tough problem. That would take some thinking. I would love to talk to you offline about like strategy and just help brainstorm in any way I can, or if anybody in this room has strategy on it.
I have a suggestion, which you may already know, the OTAs are a way to, you know, get your foot in the door with agencies that you don't normally do business with, and also when the solicitations come out, there are good ways to team up with bigger players who are also in the consortium.
I would only add to that. I think you're right. It is going to be challenging for you guys to work with a Booz Allen or an SAIC. But have you thought about working with like the middle tier version of yourselves, like for contractors. Like this new company that just joined, STS, they're super interesting. I think it would be worth taking time to talk to them. And then the other suggestion is, who is the other group that inside the government 40 years that you were talking about?
Esri.
Okay.
ESRI for those, I don't know if anybody's familiar with geospatial tech, but yeah, Esri's massive in the government sphere, state, local,
Yeah.
federal, and they have, not to go too deep in the weeds, right, but they've got what are called enterprise license agreements,
Right.
which, you know, the agency pays a one lump sum fee, typically in the millions, sometimes multi-millions, and the agency gets an à la carte, all you can eat sort of.
Do you think your product is better than theirs?
I think our product is different than theirs, and there's a different approach that you would take. And I worked at Esri, so I can at least speak, you know, with some semblance of knowledge as to why you would want to think about them in different ways.
I was asked that because if you think it's better, if you have an up on theirs, maybe you could partner with them.
Oh no, that's not.
Yeah.
Like,
What about,
that's our competitor.
have you talked to Amber at NGA? Do you know Amber Nightingale?
I don't know anybody.
You should meet her. I think she would have some, I don't know, suggestions. She's also, like, she's the Zach Walker of NGA. She's awesome.
Cool.
What other questions do y'all have? All of our questions from this side.
Kind of getting back to when, like early in the speech, when you have a startup getting into these contracts, are they always solicited by the government, or does the startup ever say, we have this interesting technology, do you have any applications in this area?
That is one thing that AppWorks has been really good about. They're seriously open to like almost any kind of good technology that they can find a use case for, and you can pretty much just go knock on their door any day. They're on the first floor in the space on the south side of this building, but like when you get out of the elevator straight over there, you can't miss it. There's a big like VR flight simulator in their space. I would talk to Jen Mars or Eric Fram or any of those people. If there's something that they can help with, they'll absolutely talk with you. And if they're not a good fit, they'll usually refer you to somebody else. Like, whoa, what do you know? Have you talked to these people? This is a big problem they're trying to solve. Go talk to them. And I think DIU is the same way. Like, they're always looking for, potential, solutions to big challenges that you probably don't even know about.
Yeah,
Is that-
for sure. I mean, AppWorks has been a great point of contact for, I think they're just a little bit on the lower of a barrier to entry compared to some others.
Some would say too low. I am not one of those people. But I think that's where, like, Army right now, like, if you had something that is right in their wheelhouse and you went and talked to them, they'd be like, man, this is super cool. We have no idea how to work with you yet. We're working on that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, like, I love those guys and I'm excited about where they're headed. But right now, like, DIU and AppWorks are the place to go.
Army Applications Lab is great too. I love their team, but they're just specific on their focus.
Yeah.
They're not as open to, hey, whatever you got, we'll take a look at it and then be interested in giving you a SIPR for it.
Now that AppWorks and Army Futures and the others have their own innovation arms, I guess, where does that leave DIU, and how does DIU prioritize what they're going after versus the AppWorks and Army Futures and others?
They're not really that tailored, honestly. It's pretty open. I've seen everything from like biometrics and biotechnology on their website to cybersecurity. It's across the board for DIU. AppWorks originally started out as sticking to more VR, virtual reality, and then pilot training, but they've expanded a little some things, but they're more aviation focused. But DIU is a very broad spectrum.
Right, I guess, like, how do they know, like, that they're not overlapping in terms of, like, certain things that they're focusing on? Maybe they are.
In some cases they are.
Yeah,
like
they are.
there have been companies that have gotten contracts with DIU and AppWorks.
For, like, the same stuff.
I mean, that's a good
I don't know how
question.
that goes. I've never been in that scenario where two were trying to use it. I do know that you can't have two SIBRs out at one time. You can put the two applications in at the same time, but only one can be awarded.
Well, and I think the other thing, like, Pilot Training Next was a program that AppWorks spun up, and then the Army, this is the other thing, like, especially Army and Air Force, I didn't know about this, and you guys may already know this, but apparently, like, when they split off and when the Air Force split off from the Army back in the 40s or 50s or whenever it was.
40s.
When was it?
40s.
Okay. So there's still this, like, lingering animosity, and it's weird. Like, I don't really understand it, but, like, AppWorks is the Air Force solution, and Pilot Training Next is the program to like improve pilot training. Well, the Army trains pilots too, so they're now like Pilot Training Next is actually working with, I think it's called like Aviation Next, and they're literally building the same program. Again, as a taxpayer, I'm like, guys, don't do that. But so that would be an interesting case for like them sharing companies that are already working on Pilot Training Next.
Well, the Army, that's another thing, the Army and the Navy have been at each other's throats since the War of 1812. So.
Yeah.
If you think it's bad now, wait till the Navy moves in too.
I know. I was in the Navy, and I'm very disappointed that nobody's here yet. But
Yeah, we've been
Is that right?
talking to those guys, like Naval Special Warfare. They've come to visit a couple times, so we'll see.
We've supported, as an AppWorks, we've supported Navy hackathons here
Yeah,
in the Capital Factory.
the Zach Staples and
Zach
Fathom
Staples,
5.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know if I met you, but I know we have talked at some point.
Probably. I was here with another one of my colleagues, Matt. It was about 2 or 3 years ago when the thing happened. Ironically, we got connected with DIU connection there. For Ernie was for the Ernie Celestine.
I'm not familiar.
2 to 3 months later, we had a medium 6-figure contract award. So
That's awesome.
The timing that you're referring to is like it's real. But then again, to my perspective, it's like that's great, but then how do you take it to the next level? But
Yeah.
The way I've heard the Army contract officers talk about it, to your question, I believe they are very careful to not have the DoD funding you for the same thing at the same time from 2 different areas. But if you, like, let's say you get a SBIR phase 1 and then you get a phase 2 and then you're stuck, I believe they do encourage you to then say, try a sitter, try to go for this. So like, I think my vague understanding is that's normally how they push it. You probably would know the best.
Yeah, no, they definitely do. But
it's not a bad problem to have. I mean,
no,
you know, you
absolutely not. I just
doing good. Yeah.
So the other part of this too is that we don't have a services arm. So like we're a developer platform that requires you to build all our stuff, but we don't give you the people to build it, right? We're not an application. We're not a front end application. We're APIs, SDKs, right? So we require that another party, whether it's a government personnel or the integrator, or somebody else has always got to be involved to build the thing that you eventually want, and that's a challenge.
I wouldn't ask the government to do it. I would partner and
Oh, no,
hire.
totally.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, totally, but it just depends, right? So, and we don't have a massive like sales force that we've got account managers and sales reps and, spread out across the government. We've got 5 people. Like we're a decent sized company, revenue, VC back, like we're feeling good right now, but it's like in terms of the government go to market, like there's just so much that goes into establishing one of those that it takes a long time to do.
Yeah.
And, it's resources. So.
Yes.
Are they only interested in kind of the technology aspect? So like, we have some stuff when we train through some technology, but are they only gonna be interested in that side, or do you think they're interested in like some other innovations? I mean, I was out with these guys for 6 years. I've seen a lot of the problems that were there, and some of them can be solved just through the human aspect of, being able to not let one air run into another, for example. And I just didn't know if they're interested in that side of things, or should we really focus on the technology end when we give it to them? Because we're kind of a dual approach.
Right. I think in my understanding of the way that they build the solicitations, like there is like a technology component to it, but I would encourage you to just look at some of the solicitations that they put out and kind of see the flavor of what they're looking for. I haven't heard of any. I don't know if Sarah.
I would also encourage you you don't have to look just at military agencies. The EPA may want it, the CDC may want it.
The IRS.
Any,
It's another one. I'm like, I don't.
And they all use STTR as well.
Okay.
So, it's another avenue for you to investigate. And STTR has its own website, and it'll tell you all the agencies and what they're looking for. So,
Okay, cool.
not just not just military traditional that we think about would take technology that you could use.
Cool. All right, I think we're about out of time because I have to get running. Rebecca wanted me to mention this. If anybody is interested in talking more about memberships, you can definitely go and chat with them. Rebecca should be around for the happy hour, so you'll see her. But thank you guys for being here. If you have any questions, let me know. I do have to run, but if anyone wants to grab a card, I'd be happy to connect with you later. So thank you very much.
I would like to get a card. Is it possible to get a copy of the slides too?
Yeah.
I'd sure like to look at some of those links in there.
Yeah. I don't know that it's publicly listed right now, but I also would probably go in and do that. Actually, just send me a note and I can just like PDF it or something.
Okay, here's my card.
Awesome. Great. Jerry, nice to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I wanna grab one of
Cool.
those too. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah.
I will be happy to send to you. Your name is?
I just added you on LinkedIn, I don't have a card to give you.
Last year.
I feel like you'll have a lot.
Yeah. I look forward to it. Okay.
I mean, I think it's good.
What's that?
Matt Johnson is like the 12th most dominated in the US.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
Matt-
my name's
There it is, Matt Johnson. Sean Duffy is not quite as common, but there was a congressman from Wisconsin who just retired. So like now I feel like if I want to go into politics, I can totally do that. It's fun. Anyhow, well, great to meet
Yeah, I will let you know here. I've got some.
you. Sure, send me an email. Let's chat for sure.
Excellent.
All right, nice to meet you.
If y'all wanna follow me, I can take y'all into the kitchen for that food and drinks.
Hey dude, I didn't get a run, but I'd love to grab a card. I'm also a member here if you're on Slack or something, I'll just email you. if it's easier.
I am on Slack. I'm email, Slack, text. I'm much more responsive via text and Slack. But yeah, I'd love to chat. What's your name?
Brendan.
Brendan?
Yeah, Brendan Hayes.
Nice to meet you, Brendan.
Yeah, I'd be interested to talk about, one, if there's anything we can do to potentially market this current, all these city rewards that they're trying to give away
Yeah.
through the Capital Factory, and
I would
two,
love that.
yeah, I mean, they would love, Army would love it. I'm sure the Capital Factory companies would love it. And then we also just did a great event in North Carolina.
Oh, you
And,
did Innovation Foundry? No, that was so common.
no, it was an industry day.
Okay.
It just happened on 10th.
Who's
And,
we? What's the company? What company?
VT Arc is who I'm a subcontractor, but I have
Okay.
my own marketing company that's based here at Capital Factory.
Cool. That's awesome.
But yeah, I think we could do something similar here, and I'm actually meeting with VT Arc tomorrow.
An industry day.
Yeah.
So we're actually.
Or did you guys already do that?
Not
Sorry,
yet.
You have to go.
No. I can walk and talk. I'm actually going to a Seaball League program. Full circle park.
You gotta keep those commitments.
Dude, it's rough. It's a rough life, but so we're doing in addition to the smart gliders, which are all like government based. We're talking about doing what we're calling.
The moon probably does too.
Oh, there's so many like interesting like theories, I would just